all women are different, but they are all women, this video is androcentric from a men's point of view and is presented as opinion, commentary, and debate. Expressing opinions is not violence. These are ideas to challenge, question, and argue in public, because classical liberalism relies on the First Amendment for its dialectic. If you are a feminist, then consider this. If patriarchy truly existed as claimed, feminism could not. And if all men are trash and women are equal to men, then what are we to conclude? Women will die for their children, men will die for their wives and children, and God chose to die for all mankind. Authority rolls up with responsibility. If this framing of facts offends you, click off to a cute cat video. Proceeding further will expose you to gamma bias and criticism directed at ideas, claims, institutions, not at any individual's virtue or dignity. Our method follows the 7 liberal arts: the trivium, grammar, logic, rhetoric, and the quadrivium, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy, and the transcendentals, the good, true, and beautiful. If this framework is not for you, feel free to exit now. It's no disgrace. Women are wonderful. God bless America. Men are great. Feminismus delendus 8. The Feminist Trap: How Women Use the State and Society to Control Men. Written by Conrad Riker. Available now. Links in description. The Feminist Trap: A field guide for men who still notice reality. The Violence of the Teabag. How feminist standpoint epistemology framed the cardinal virtues as labor trafficking to justify female infantilization and the erasure of male sacrifice. I once observed someone with minimal reading ability earn a doctorate in gender studies after asserting that herbal tea serves as an instrument of capitalist exploitation. I witnessed a woman positioned within a protected environment featuring luxury materials, climate control, and total security, surrounded by prosperity created through male risk-taking, proclaim herself a victim of an imposition simply because someone offered her chamomile. The aggression was not in the beverage. The aggression existed in how the term aggression had been emptied of significance, expanded like paper money until it buys only self-centered grievances. This represents verbal devaluation as a tactic. When everything becomes damage, then nothing qualifies as damage, and the person who suffers a minor injury asserts moral parity with someone whose limbs were destroyed in brutal labor conditions. Maturists developed appropriate, prepared. This Latin term indicates purposeful fulfillment, the transformation of possibility into responsibility. Yet, for the feminist analyzer, adulthood does not represent an excellence to develop. It signifies a commodity to be harvested, a scene where youth was eliminated by demands for capability. Ancient Greeks named the rejection of this growth process paideia, the domain of the young, the undeveloped. The writing we are examining functions as a declaration for permanent paideia, insisting that women maintain a condition of never-ending childhood, freedom from consequences, and dependence on the therapy-providing government. View maturational extraction syndrome via strict logic. Premise A, the writer claims that praising girls for emotional regulation and service to others constitutes grooming for exploitation. Premise B, the writer claims the remedy is to refuse these duties and take space for oneself. Conclusion, the argument pushes for abolishing female responsibility while retaining all female rights, a one-way structure where men owe obligations to women, but women owe nothing to anyone. Not even their nurturing families. This exposes a biological cheat strategy, extract resources from the group while refusing contribution to group survival. The mature girl mediating her mother's trauma is not colonized. She learns the ancient skill of social cohesion, the glue holding tribes together while men died on the perimeter. Schopenhauer observed that women excel at social arts. The feminist turns this genius into a diagnosis of pathology. Meanwhile, the empathy gap widens. Where is the syndrome for the 14-year-old boy told to be a man when his father drinks himself into rage? Where is the analysis of boys sent to die in foreign sands before they could vote? The piece amplifies gamma bias, minimizing male suffering while magnifying female discomfort into structural oppression. The tea sachet is not an extraction apparatus. It is a luxury good produced by a civilization of such immense surplus, generated overwhelmingly by male labor, male innovation, male risk, that its inhabitants can afford to pathologize a recommendation to relax. The global wellness market exists because men built the roads that ship the herbs, men built the power plants that run the diffusers, men died in the mines that yielded the metals for the trade show infrastructure. The extraction flows entirely one direction, from male disposability to female consumption. But to point this out is to commit the cardinal sin against the feminist epistemology, applying the trivium's grammar and logic to a rhetorical structure designed to bypass reason entirely. Standpoint theory declares that embodied knowing trumps objective fact that a woman's feeling of oppression constitutes proof of oppression, and that male dissent is merely ignorance of her lived experience. This is epistemic gating. Identity determines truth, and only the designated victims hold the keys. The loop is self-sealing. If you agree, you confirm the theory. If you disagree, your disagreement confirms your bias. The cult eats its own tail and calls it revolution.
Buncombe article by a feminist PhD. The Violence of Maturity, How Your Tea Break is a Reproductive Labor Camp. I realized something at the Portland Wellness and Lifestyle Trade Show last March. I was standing in the Sanctuary Lounge, crushed velvet, muted sage walls. The inevitable diffuser pumping lavender into recirculated air, when a sales representative handed me an herbal tea sachet with the words, "You carry so much, take a moment," printed on the biodegradable label. Sister, I felt the violence in my body before I could name it. What I experienced in that moment was what I now call maturational extraction syndrome, MES. And if you have ever been told you're so mature for your age, you have already been colonized by it. The praise that grooms. Let us speak truth about maturity as it is applied to girls and women. When a girl is told she is mature, what is actually being communicated? Standpoint theory, the only epistemological framework that centers embodied knowing, reveals that this praise is never neutral. It is a recruitment, a grooming, an induction into what post-structuralist scholars have identified as the effective reserve army of labor. The mature girl is the one who absorbs her father's emotional outbursts without complaint, mediates her mother's unresolved trauma, suppresses her own developmental needs to maintain family homeostasis, performs calm while boys are permitted chaos. Maturity in girls is not a description. It is a deployment order. I spoke with a 23-year-old marketing associate at the trade show. Let's call her Elle, who told me she had been praised for her maturity since age 9. "I always took care of everyone," she said, clutching her chamomile sampler. "I thought it meant I was strong." What it meant, sister, was that you had been selected for extraction. Your capacity to hold others' pain had been identified, cultivated and harvested long before you could consent to the arrangement. The tea sachet as extraction apparatus. Consider the herbal tea sachet. Innocent, restorative, think again. The global wellness tea market is projected to reach 4.8 billion by 2027. Who consumes these products? Overwhelmingly women. Women who have been conditioned to believe that their exhaustion is an individual problem, requiring individual solutions. Sip your chamomile, breathe through your lavender. Return to the site of your exploitation refreshed. The Trade Show Wellness Lounge is not a respite from capitalism. It is capitalism's maintenance station for its most valuable extraction targets. When the sales representative told me I carry so much, she was not witnessing my oppression. She was identifying me as a high-yield extraction node and offering me the self-care that would return me to productivity. The sachet contains herbs. What it delivers is the message that your burnout is a personal failing cured by personal consumption. This is not wellness. This is extraction logistics. Feedback loops of extraction. MIS operates through recursive feedback mechanisms that I have mapped across therapeutic, educational, and domestic institutions. The maturity praise loop. A girl suppresses her needs. Adults praise her maturity. She internalizes suppression as identity. She suppresses more. The praise intensifies. She becomes a reliable source of emotional and reproductive labor for life. The self-care extraction loop. Women experience exhaustion from unpaid labor. Market offers self-care products. Women purchase products. Purchase is framed as taking care of yourself. Underlying extraction continues. Women return to extraction sites slightly soothed, but structurally unchanged. The trade show temporality. These expositions of wellness are feedback loop amplification chambers. Every booth, every sample, every take-a-moment message is designed to diagnose your depletion while obscuring its cause, then sell you a treatment that ensures your continued availability for depletion. I watch this play out across the convention floor. Women in comfortable shoes, always comfortable shoes, the uniform of those who know they will be standing for others, moving from booth to booth, sampling adaptogens and nervine tonics, describing their stress to sales representatives who nodded with performed empathy before handing them discount codes. The loop feeds on itself. The tea is the drug that treats the wound. The tea cannot heal. What your body knows. Postmodern subjectivity teaches us that all knowing is situated, and your body, sister, knows things your mind has been trained to disbelieve. When someone calls you mature, your body registers the extraction before your ego accepts the compliment. That small contraction, that subtle flattening. The way mature creates a cage of expectation around your future choices. When you enter a wellness space, your nervous system may register safety, but whose safety? The safety of the extraction apparatus that needs you functional enough to continue extracting. Your exhaustion is not a bug in the system. It is the system working exactly as designed. The praxis of refusal. I left the trade show with nothing but my analysis. I poured the tea sampler into a potted plant. The plant, at least, has no extraction agenda. To refuse MES is to refuse the maturity that was never earned, it was assigned. It is to recognize that the wellness industry is a damage management sector of the same apparatus that damages you. It is to stop taking moments and start taking space. Space to be immature, unreasonable, demanding, and unavailable for extraction. The next time someone hands you a tea sachet and tells you to breathe, consider, what labor am I being refreshed to return to? What extraction is this comfort protecting? Decolonize the steep. Your exhaustion is not a personal problem. It is evidence, and evidence properly understood becomes accusation. Dr. Wynona, feminist Marxist, PhD, is Professor of Gender Studies at the University of Critical Consciousness and author of The Emotional Reserve Army, Gendered Extraction Under Late Capitalism, forthcoming. She remains, as ever, on the side of the dispossessed.
The alchemy of victimhood, transmuting virtue into trauma. Aristotle, in the Nicomachean Ethics, defines maturity not as a psychic wound inflicted by the patriarchy, but as the telos of the human animal, the actualization of reason over appetite, the ascent from potentiality to act. The word itself descends from the Latin maturus, meaning ripe or timely, indicating that a thing has reached its proper end. To be mature is to have fulfilled one's nature. Yet the writer of this screed, a woman who evidently believes that being handed a free tea sachet constitutes a form of colonial violence, wishes to convince you that the cultivation of prudence, temperance, and fortitude in young women is actually extraction. This is not analysis. It is the tantrum of a child demanding that the very concept of growth be pathologized so that she might remain perpetually infantile, forever blameless, forever the object of state rescue. Natural law dictates that organisms either mature or rot. What this writer calls maturational extraction syndrome is simply the refusal to rot recast as oppression. Consider the breathtaking arrogance of a worldview that declares the expectation of emotional competence to be a war crime, while remaining stone-silent about the bone-grinding realities of male existence. This is the gamma bias engine firing on all cylinders. Female inconvenience becomes systemic catastrophe. Male death becomes invisible background noise. The writer wails that a 9-year-old girl was selected for extraction because she learned to mediate her mother's emotional storms, as if this were not the primordial drama of every household in human history, as if boys were not simultaneously being told to suppress their tears. Toughen up and prepare to die in foreign sands for causes they did not choose. Where is the syndrome for the 14-year-old boy working the fields in 1850? Where is the extraction analysis for the conscripts fed into the meat grinder of Verdun? The empathy gap yawns wide enough to swallow civilizations. Women's distress is amplified into moral emergency. Men's destruction is normalized as the cost of doing business. The writer looks at a trade show with lavender diffusers and sees a reproductive labor camp. I look at the suicide statistics, men killing themselves at 3 to 4 times the rate of women, often after being stripped of their children and assets by the very genocentric family courts this ideology birthed, and I see the real extraction. But that extraction does not fit the narrative, so it vanishes. Schopenhauer, that great pessimist and clearer of scales from men's eyes, observed that women possess a specific genius for the management of the social and innate capacity to navigate the invisible webs of feeling and obligation that hold the fractious human animal together. The writer cites the girl who mediates her mother's unresolved trauma and absorbs her father's emotional outbursts as a victim of grooming. But what if she is simply exhibiting the feminine genius in its primordial form? What if the capacity to hold the emotional center of a family is not a wound but a power? The leftist ideologue cannot tolerate this possibility. She must convince women that their native strengths are actually imposed burdens, that their role in the grand choreography of human survival is a conspiracy invented by men to exploit them. This is the great lie. The girl who learns early to read a room, to soothe a temper, to maintain the fragile peace of the domestic sphere, she is not being colonized. She is being initiated into the ancient and terrible wisdom of her sex, the wisdom that builds civilizations by ensuring that the home does not collapse while the men are away hunting, warring, building, dying. To call this extraction is to declare that motherhood itself is theft. The Marxist foundation beneath this entire fantasy, that the family acts as an economic unit of exploitation, that emotional ties constitute unpaid labor, and that the home serves as a site of extraction, is not simply mistaken. It is a calculated inversion of truth. The family remains the primal cell of society, the institution mandated by natural law and proven by millennia of human history as the only dependable mechanism for conveying culture, virtue, and sanity to the next generation. The principle of subsidiarity, that overlooked jewel of Western political heritage, asserts that affairs ought to be managed by the smallest, most local competent power. The family holds that authority regarding the nurture of children. Yet the leftist ideologue examines the family and perceives only a reserve army of labor waiting to be liberated into the gentle clutches of the corporate state Leviathan. This reflects the actual agenda, not to free women from oppression, but to dissolve the private associations, separating the individual from total state command. The wellness industry that the writer claims to despise is merely the therapeutic wing of this identical Leviathan, a maintenance depot for atomized consumers, persuaded that their exhaustion is a medical condition demanding products rather than a spiritual void demanding meaning. The dynamic labeled the maturity praise loop, girls suppress needs. Adults commend maturity. Girls suppress more functions as the civilizational feedback mechanism, preventing societies from descending into permanent adolescence. When a young female is praised for maturity, she is inducted into the rank of stakeholders responsible for the perpetuation of culture. She is told that she matters, that her conduct carries consequences, and that she is capable of bearing the weight of the human story. The writer wishes to sever this loop. She aims to replace the civilizational association, the ancient covenant whereby virtue is transmitted to the next generation, with a therapeutic association where no duty is owed to anyone but the self, where every demand is trauma, where every expectation is violence, and where the only sin is the failure to validate the infinite preciousness of one's own feelings. This is not liberation. It is the death of the soul by 1,000 therapeutic cuts. The cardinal virtues, prudence, justice, fortitude, temperance, formed the backbone of Western moral education for 2,000 years. The writer's essay is a systematic assault on each. Fortitude, the endurance of hardship without complaint, becomes suppression and colonization. Temperance, the governance of emotion by reason, becomes a cage of expectation. Prudence, the wise mediation of conflict, becomes unpaid emotional labor. Justice, the giving of each his due, is nowhere to be found, replaced by the infinite demand that the universe reshuffle itself to accommodate the hurts of women who have been taught to interpret every inconvenience as evidence of systemic conspiracy. This is not social analysis. It is the weaponization of resentment, the transformation of character flaws into political virtues, the recasting of weakness as moral superiority. The mature woman of the Western tradition, one who had mastered her passions, who could be relied upon in crisis, who understood that duty preceded feeling, has been replaced by the eternal adolescent clutching her tea sachet, demanding that the world apologize for the crime of expecting her to grow up. The trivium, grammar, logic, rhetoric, constituted the bedrock of medieval schooling, because old scholars realized that distinct thought necessitated first defining terms, next testing premises, and only afterward persuading others. The essayist reverses this sequence entirely. She opens with rhetoric, the lavender-scented, velvet-draped staging meant to circumvent your critical faculties and trigger your empathy. She refuses to define her terms. Maturity receives no etymological or philosophical scrutiny. It is merely posited as a form of extraction. Extraction itself remains undefined, a hazy metaphor lifted from Marxist theory and forced onto the sphere of emotion, where it functions to make every human exchange feel criminal. Logic is missing. Where is the testable premise? Where is the falsifiable evidence? Standpoint theory, the assertion that only the embodied knowing of the oppressed can access truth, is just a linguistic cheat code, a method of declaring immunity from rebuttal. Disagreement proves you lack the situated knowledge of the victim. Your argument is void before it begins. This is not reasoning, it is the seance, the oracle, the reading of entrails. She does not wish to persuade you. She wishes to cast a spell. And here we arrive at the ugly truth beneath the lavender fog. The writer concludes that evidence, properly understood, becomes accusation. This is the death of justice and the birth of the show trial. In the Western tradition, descended from Magna Carta, refined by centuries of common law, enshrined in the due process guarantees of every free constitution, evidence is the means by which accusations are tested. The accuser bears the burden of proof. The accused has the right to confront witnesses, to challenge premises, to demand that the state prove its case before it strips him of life, liberty, or property. The writer proposes a different system. Accusation is evidence. The mere fact of feeling hurt proves that harm was done. The mere fact of exhaustion proves that extraction occurred. No defense is possible. No standard of proof applies. The tea sachet is not a gift. It is a crime scene. The mature girl is not a developing human. She is a victim of grooming. This is the grammar of totalitarianism, the logic of the witch hunt, the epistemology of the mob. It ends where it always ends, with the innocent condemned by feelings, with the state empowered to punish without proof, with the word justice reduced to a euphemism for the settling of scores. The writer calls this activism. I call it the destruction of everything that makes civilization possible. This semantic sorcery reaches its apotheosis in the writer's central accusation that the wellness industry commits violence against the exhausted bodies it claims to serve. Here we see the full machinery of leftist propaganda whirring into action. Status, the writer as voice of the dispossessed, confers immunity. Her claims cannot be questioned, while sanction, the charge of violence, destroys the target. But what is violence? The question matters, because the Western tradition has spent 2 millennia refining this concept, and the writer demolishes it in a single paragraph of therapeutic word salad. The wellness gulag, semantic inflation, and the epistemology of the nursery. The term violence derives from the Latin violentus, associated with vis, force, violation, and the physical breach of limits. The Romans, builders of aqueducts and codifiers of natural law, grasped that definitions matter. When a clerk offers an herbal sachet and suggests you take a moment, no vis has transpired, no boundary is crossed, and no force is applied. Winona's writing displays not analysis, but a linguistic hijacking, a category error the Thomistic tradition would judge as bordering on the pathological. She purports to feel violence in her body before she could name it, a stance that is not epistemology but hysteria in academic dress. The body does not know what the mind cannot speak. This is medieval mysticism, the same feminine solipsism behind the Salem witch trials, now rebranded as standpoint theory and given tenure. To replace the dialectic, reasoned discourse between equals with embodied knowing is to surrender the Western birthright of logos to the nursery logic of feelings. The projection mechanism in this essay operates with the precision of a Swiss clock. Dr. Winona accuses the sales representative of identifying her as a high-yield extraction node, a phrase so clinical it would make a Soviet commissar blush with envy. But consider, who is the actual predator here? The woman handing out free tea samples at a trade show, or the tenured academic who scans the horizon of human kindness for targets to colonize with her grievance taxonomy? The sales rep wants nothing more than a moment of commercial exchange, capitalism's gentle handshake. Dr. Winona, by contrast, wants to conscript every woman who ever felt tired into her revolutionary army of the dispossessed. The conspiracy here is not capitalism selling chamomile. It is the academic industrial complex manufacturing existential crisis where none exists. These ideologues are emotional vampires who cannot sustain themselves without inventing new categories of victimhood. They are the bad actors. They are the extraction apparatus. They take functioning women, convince them they are damaged, and harvest their resentment for political capital. Let us speak of actual violence and actual extraction, the kind that does not require scare quotes. In 2022, men accounted for 78.7% of all suicide deaths in the United States. That is not a tea sachet. That is 39,255 fathers, sons, and brothers who decided the extraction was intolerable. Men constitute 92% of workplace fatalities. Where is Dr. Winona's essay on the extraction syndrome of the coal miner, the oil rig worker, the roofer who falls 6 stories because he was building the convention center where she sips her chamomile? The wellness industry she condemns exists only because men have extracted resources from the earth, built logistical networks, and created such unprecedented abundance that women can afford to purchase $4 billion worth of herbal placebos. The genuine extraction in civilization is male utility transformed into infrastructure, safety, and surplus, all of which is rendered invisible by the gamma bias that treats male suffering as background radiation and female discomfort as moral emergency. The Sanctuary Lounge at the Portland Wellness and Lifestyle Trade Show represents the end stage of progressive utopianism, a lavender-scented, crushed velvet cage where risk has been eliminated, conflict banned, and excellence flattened into comfortable mediocrity. This is the world the feminine imperative builds when unchecked by masculine reason, the epistemology of the nursery extended into perpetuity. Notice that Dr. Winona, despite her professed hatred of this apparatus, cannot bring herself to leave it. She attends the trade show, accepts the free samples, then pours the tea into a potted plant in a gesture of revolutionary theater that changes nothing. This is the left's eternal condition, captive to the system they claim to despise, incapable of building alternatives, skilled only in complaint. The sanctuary is their paradise and their prison simultaneously, a soft totalitarianism where everyone is safe and no one is free. Examine the circular reasoning behind maturational extraction syndrome. If a woman buys the tea, she is a victim of extraction. If she rejects the tea, just as Dr. Winona dumped it into a potted plant, she becomes a revolutionary who has decolonized the steppe. Both results confirm the hypothesis. This is not epistemology, it is theology. Karl Popper identified this format as the mark of pseudoscience, a theory that cannot be falsified, which absorbs all opposing evidence, creating a closed loop immune to reason. The Catholic Church was at least honest enough to call its unfalsifiable claims faith. Dr. Winona names her standpoint theory and demands it receive the respect given to physics. Yet there is a simpler word for a belief system where every path leads to a predetermined ending: cult. The writer is not analyzing the world, she is recruiting for a religion of resentment. The signature line, "She remains as ever on the side of the dispossessed," is the moral shield behind which all leftist ideology hides. By claiming to speak for victims, the speaker places herself beyond criticism. To question her logic is not academic disagreement. It is an attack on the vulnerable themselves. This is the immunity clause in the propaganda generation cycle, stayist, derived from championing the dispossessed, which generates sanction against any who question, which produces immunity from accountability. But let us apply the Western standard that built civilization. Ideas stand on their merit, not the status of the speaker. Aristotle did not sign his works on the side of the dispossessed. He signed them Aristotle and let the logic speak. The moment someone invokes their moral position to shield their arguments from scrutiny, you may be certain their arguments cannot survive scrutiny. The four horsemen of the men's rights apocalypse ride unmentioned through Dr. Wynona's essay, "The Empathy Gap That Makes Her Blind to Male Suffering." The gamma bias that amplifies female inconvenience into systemic crisis. The male disposability that treats the men who built her convention center as invisible infrastructure, and the responsibility without authority that demands men fund a society they no longer lead. Family courts award mothers custody in 82.5% of cases. Men are 165% more likely to be convicted than women for the same crimes. The paternal uncertainty rate, the biological reality that men can never know with certainty that their genetic investment is genuine, stands at approximately 2 to 12% across populations, a figure that would be called a crisis of epidemic proportions if it affected women. These are not T-sachets. These are structural realities that destroy lives. But the left cannot see them because their epistemology begins with the conclusion: women are oppressed, and works backward, discarding any datum that contradicts the theorem. Dr. Wynona advises women to take space and become unavailable for extraction. Let us trace this logic to its terminus. A woman refuses to be mature, which is to say, she refuses to mediate family conflict, absorb others' distress, or maintain household equilibrium. She becomes immature, unreasonable, demanding. Who pays the price? The men in her orbit, fathers, husbands, sons who must compensate for her abdication. This is the eternal pattern. Women's liberation is always purchased with men's additional servitude. The woman who refuses emotional labor does not create a vacuum. She creates a burden that falls on male shoulders. Wynona frames this as revolutionary action. A more honest accounting would call it parasitism, a privileged class extracting concessions while contributing nothing. The West tolerated this trade when women contributed domestic labor and reproductive investment in return. Now the trade is one-sided. Men provide resources, protection, infrastructure, and emotional stability, while women provide complaints about tea. The syllogism that destroys this entire ideology is simple. If exhaustion is evidence of extraction, as Dr. Wynona claims, and the solution is to refuse labor, as she advocates, then civilization collapses. No one builds bridges, mines coal, or maintains power grids out of self-care. These require men who have been told from boyhood that their purpose is service, sacrifice, and stoic endurance. The very maturity Dr. Wynona condemns in girls is the virtue that makes civilization possible, and its absence is the marker of barbarism. The Romans understood this. The medievals understood this. Every functional society in human history has understood that adults must suppress impulses, absorb conflicts, and maintain order. Only in the deranged pathology of late-stage feminism is maturity recast as colonization and responsibility reframed as extraction. The plant that received Dr. Wynona's tea will grow or die based on its ability to perform its function without complaint. The author might learn from it. Let us dispense with the hallucinations of Dr. Wynona and return to the terra firma of reality, where the violence of a tea sachet is revealed as the semantic inflation of a mind possessed by the spirit of resentment. When the writer weeps over the extraction of being told to calm down, she is employing the oldest trick in the leftist playbook, gamma bias. She amplifies the trivial discomfort of a trade show conversation into a structural war crime, while completely rendering invisible the male reality of disposability. Where is the maturational extraction syndrome for the young man in the salt mines of Siberia or the damp trenches of the Somme? Where is the empathy for the husband working a double shift in a sewage treatment plant, so his wife can afford to complain about the violent temperature of her Earl Grey? This is the empathy gap weaponized. Female distress is a moral emergency requiring state intervention, while male suffering is merely the background noise of civilization's engine. The good doctor claims that maturity is a trap, a deployment order into an effective reserve army. She inverts the natural law. In the Western tradition, maturity is the telos of the human soul, the moment when the appetitive will is harnessed to the chariot of reason. Aristotle did not view the cultivation of temperance as colonization. He viewed it as the prerequisite for freedom. By framing the expectation of emotional regulation as grooming, the feminist ideologue seeks to infantilize the adult woman, turning her into a permanent child state dependent on the external validation of the victimhood cult. This is the destruction of the virtue of fortitude. If you cannot carry so much without collapsing into a heap of neurosis, you are not a victim of capitalism. You are a failed stakeholder in the social contract. Finally, observe the galling projection of the self-care extraction loop. The true extraction apparatus is not the wellness industry, but the state feminist complex itself. The sanctuary lounge exists only because the surplus male labor of generations innovation agriculture. Logistics has created a world of such immense safety and abundance that women have the luxury of pathologizing a tea break. The wellness industry is merely the parasite on the host of Western productivity. When the author tells you to decolonize the steep, she is really telling you to abandon your duties to your family and your community, to retreat into a solipsistic cocoon of embodied knowing, which is just a fancy word for hysteria. You have seen through the semantic fog. You now possess the dialectical immunity to detect the gamma bias in the wild, to spot the standpoint epistemology trick where feelings override facts, and to reject the asymmetric status that grants women the license to reframe courtesy as oppression. The red pill is not just knowledge, it is a shield against the weaponized guilt of a dying civilization. Go forth, protect your sovereignty, speak the forbidden truths, and never let a leftist define the meaning of your maturity or your tea ever again. And now the sponsored book introduction. The Feminist Trap: How Women Use the State and Society to Control Men. Men, wake the hell up. You've been lied to, sold a fairy tale where marriage is love's grand finale, when it's really a legal ambush. I learned this the hard way, watching my bank account bleed dry, my kids turned into bargaining chips, and my ex-wife's lawyer high-fiving her over my ruin. You think it won't happen to you? That's what I thought too, right before the state handed her my paycheck and called it equality. This book isn't theory. It's a battlefield manual forged in the trenches of divorce court, evolutionary biology, and cold, hard data. If you're a man who values his freedom, wealth, and sanity, this is your lifeline. If you're a feminist, a white knight, or a guy who still thinks happy wife, happy life isn't a suicide pact, put this down and go knit a uterus-shaped pillow. For the rest of you, let's get raw. Marriage today isn't a vow. It's a rigged contract where she gets the house, the kids, and half your future while you get a folding chair in a studio apartment. Studies prove it. 67% of men see sex evaporate after 5 years of marriage, and 92% of no-fault divorces gut men financially. I'll show you why I do is code for I own you, how the state profits from your suffering, and why Elon Musk's 200 million divorce is the rule, not the exception. You'll learn to dodge paternity fraud, outmaneuver the custody industrial complex, and why Texas beats California for alimony refugees. This isn't whining, it's war. And if you're tired of being the beta provider funding her empowerment, the chapters ahead, like the child support trap and sexual access economics, will arm you with nuclear-grade red pill truths. Your choice is simple. Keep swallowing blue pill fantasies about equality, while she files restraining orders and empties your accounts, or fight back with strategies that work. I've buried friends who chose wrong, men who ate a bullet after the courts took everything. Don't be them. Read this, stay single, build empires, and let the system choke on its own hypocrisy. The kittens are safe. Your future isn't. The Feminist Trap: How Women Use the State and Society to Control Men written by Conrad Riker. Buy now, links in description.